I'm Janessa, 29 years old, and I thought I understood what it meant to lose everything until I actually lived through it. Sitting in that donation center, watching my blood flow through tubes for $40, I felt like I'd reached the absolute bottom of my life. My husband had left me drowning in debt he created, walked away when I needed him most, and I was selling my plasma just to afford bread and peanut butter. But that $40 changed everything in ways I never could have imagined. Before I tell you how this story unfolds, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe, because what started as my lowest moment became the beginning of something I never could have imagined. 3 years ago, my life looked completely different. I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, in a nice apartment with my husband, Derek. We'd met at Arizona State University during our junior year, fell in love over late-night study sessions, and dreams of building something meaningful together. After 7 years of dating, we got married in a small ceremony at the Desert Botanical Garden, surrounded by blooming cacti and our closest friends. Life felt full of promise back then. 2 years into our marriage, we made a decision that seemed brilliant at the time. We started a marketing consulting firm together. Derek had a business degree and natural charisma that made clients trust him instantly. I had a background in graphic design and content creation skills that complemented his sales abilities perfectly. For the first 2 years, Thompson and Winters Consulting did reasonably well. We weren't getting rich, but we were making about $90,000 a year, combined building a client base, learning the ropes of entrepreneurship. We had about $30,000 in savings. We talked about buying a house, maybe starting a family in a few years. Then came January of last year, and Derek came home one evening with an idea that would change everything. "Babe," he said, spreading financial projections across our dining table, "we need to think bigger. We're playing it too safe." I looked at the numbers he'd prepared showing potential growth if we expanded. We could hire staff, get a real office, invest in proper marketing. He continued, his eyes bright with ambition. "But that requires capital." He wanted to take out a business loan for $150,000. I remember the exact moment I voiced my concerns. "That's a lot of debt," I said quietly. "What if something goes wrong?" Derek reached across the table and took my hand. "Nothing's going to go wrong. This is our future. Trust me." And I did. I trusted him completely. We went to the bank together, filled out the applications, provided all the documentation they required. When the loan was approved, Derek was ecstatic. "We're really doing this," he kept saying. By February, we'd signed a lease on a commercial office space in downtown Phoenix, a sleek, modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows. We bought new computers, design software, conference room furniture, and a coffee machine that cost more than my first car. We hired 5 employees, young and eager, ready to help us build something special. Derek handled the business development while I managed the creative team. For those first few months, everything felt like forward momentum. March and April were good months. We signed 3 new clients, each bringing in steady monthly retainers. Our employees were productive and excited about the work. Derek started talking about opening a second location, maybe in Scottsdale. "You're a visionary," I told him, and I meant it. The man I married seemed destined for success, and I was proud to be building this dream alongside him. But May brought the first crack in our foundation. One of our largest clients, a tech startup that accounted for $35,000 in projected annual revenue, suddenly went under. Their funding fell through, and they had to terminate all vendor contracts immediately. When Derek told me, I felt a flutter of worry in my chest. "That's a significant loss," I said. "Should we think about cutting costs?" He waved away my concern. "It's just one client. We'll find more." His confidence was reassuring, so I pushed my anxiety aside. We continued operating at full capacity, paying our 5 employees, covering the expensive office rent, maintaining our lifestyle. June arrived with more bad news. 2 additional clients decided not to renew their contracts. One moved their marketing in-house to save money. The other simply stopped responding to Derek's emails and calls. Our revenue was dropping rapidly, but our expenses remained constant. By the middle of the month, we were struggling to make payroll on time. I suggested we needed to have a serious conversation about reducing overhead, maybe letting go of a few employees or moving to a cheaper office. Derek's response surprised me with its sharpness. "We can't look desperate," he snapped. "If we start cutting costs, other clients will think we're failing." "But we are failing," I wanted to say. I didn't. I just nodded and went back to my desk. Around this time, I started noticing changes in Derek's behavior. He began coming home later sometimes, not until 9 or 10 at night. When I asked where he'd been, he'd say he was meeting with potential clients, networking at business events, doing everything possible to bring in new revenue. But no new contracts materialized. He became protective of his phone, taking calls in another room, typing texts with the screen angled away from me. When I walked into a room unexpectedly, he'd quickly close his laptop or switch windows. The intimacy we'd once shared began to evaporate, replaced by a distance I couldn't understand. July became a nightmare. The bank called about our business loan. We were 2 months behind on payments. I hadn't even known we'd missed the first payment. Derek had been handling the finances, and I'd trusted him. Our savings account, the $30,000 we'd carefully built, was completely gone. Every penny had been poured into keeping the business afloat. We had no choice but to lay off 3 of our 5 employees. The conversations were brutal. These were people who'd trusted us, who'd left other jobs to join our startup. "I'm so sorry," I told each of them, fighting back tears. "This isn't your fault." Derek grew increasingly distant. Some nights he didn't come home at all, texting that he was staying at a hotel near a client meeting. Our conversations became transactional, focused only on business problems, devoid of any warmth or connection. The man I'd married seemed to have disappeared, replaced by a stranger who could barely look at me. Then came the night that shattered everything. I'd left the office early, around 6, exhausted from another day of trying to salvage what remained of our business. When I walked into our apartment, I heard Derek's voice coming from our bedroom. The door was slightly open. He was on the phone, and his tone was completely different from the stressed, tense voice he used with me. He sounded relaxed, even happy. "I know, babe," he was saying. "I'll figure it out. Once this business fails, I'll be free." My hand froze on my bag. "She has no idea," he continued. "The prenup will protect me. She signed everything." My heart stopped. I stood in the hallway, unable to move, unable to breathe. Every word felt like a physical blow. I pushed the door open. Derek was sitting on our bed, phone to his ear. He looked up and saw me. His face went pale. "I have to go," he said quickly into the phone and hung up. We stared at each other for a long moment. "Who were you talking to?" My voice came out surprisingly steady. Derek stood up, defensive. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it? Tell me what I just heard." Another long silence. Then, as if a dam had broken, the truth came flooding out. He'd been seeing someone else for 3 months. Her name was Sienna. She worked at one of our former client companies. They'd met during a business lunch, stayed in touch after the contract ended, and started an affair. The betrayal was crushing, but what came next was worse. "Why did you say once the business fails?" I asked. "What does that mean?" Derek wouldn't meet my eyes. "Janessa, this isn't working anymore." "Us. This." He gestured vaguely around. "I'm not happy. You're stressed all the time. Sienna makes me happy." "So you're just giving up?" I asked, my voice rising. "On our marriage. On the business we built together." He shrugged, and that casual gesture broke something in me. "I want a divorce," he said flatly. That night, Derek packed a bag and left. He said he'd stay at a hotel, that we'd figure out the details later. I sat alone in our apartment, the space we decorated together, filled with photographs of happier times, and tried to understand how my life had fallen apart so completely. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just sat on the couch until sunrise, staring at nothing. August brought the complete collapse of everything I'd known. Derek came back to the apartment, but only to pack his belongings. He'd hired a lawyer. The divorce papers were being prepared. "I'm done," he said coldly, loading boxes into his car. "I can't do this anymore. The business is failing, and so are we." I tried one more time to reach the man I'd married. "We can fix this," I said, hating how desperate I sounded. "We can get counseling, work through this, save the business." He shook his head. "I don't want to fix it. I want out." That's when I remembered the prenuptial agreement. Before our wedding, Derek had suggested we sign one. He'd framed it as protection for both of us, making sure we'd each keep what was ours if anything ever went wrong. I'd signed it without much thought, never believing we'd actually need it. Now, as I pulled out the documents and read through them with new understanding, I realized what Derek had done. The business loan, that $150,000 that was destroying us, had been structured entirely in my name. I hadn't paid attention at the time. Derek had handled the paperwork, assured me it was just easier for loan processing to have one primary borrower. According to the prenup, if we divorced, each person kept their individual assets and was responsible for their individual debts. The massive business loan was legally my responsibility alone. By September, we had no clients left. Our last two employees quit, tired of uncertain paychecks and a sinking ship. I closed the office, surrendering our lease and taking the financial penalty. The business was officially dead. Derek had already moved out completely, taking his car, his clothes, his half of our shared possessions. I was left with a failing business, crushing debt, and a marriage that existed only on paper. October brought the financial devastation. I had to sell my car just to make a partial payment on the business loan. The bank foreclosed on our apartment, all the furniture we'd bought together. Derek took what he wanted and left the rest. I packed my remaining belongings into suitcases and boxes, everything I owned in the world. My total debt was $125,000, every penny in my name. Derek, protected by the prenup he'd so carefully crafted, walked away clean. His credit was fine. His finances were intact. Mine were destroyed. I found a room to rent in a rough part of Phoenix, $350 a month, in a building that smelled like mildew and cigarette smoke. My room was barely large enough for a mattress on the floor and a small dresser. The shared bathroom down the hall was grimy no matter how often I cleaned it. But I had $200 to my name, so I took it. The divorce papers were filed. Derek disappeared completely. No phone calls, no messages, nothing. He'd gotten what he wanted. His freedom from me and from the mess he'd helped create. Finding work proved impossible. My credit was ruined. Background checks showed the bankruptcy proceedings I'd been forced to file. No established marketing firm wanted to hire someone with that kind of financial baggage. I took whatever work I could find. I handed out flyers on street corners for $5 an hour. I washed dishes at a restaurant that paid cash under the table. I made maybe $10 or $15 a day, barely enough to survive. My diet consisted of instant ramen noodles and whatever bread I could buy from the discount bin at the grocery store. Some days I didn't eat at all. I walked everywhere because I had no car. Phoenix in summer is brutal, temperatures reaching 115 degrees, and I'd trudge miles to whatever odd job I could find. My phone was a prepaid burner, the cheapest plan available. I had no friends left. People I'd known during the successful years had drifted away when I could no longer afford to meet them for coffee or drinks. My family was limited. My mother lived in Ohio, struggling with her own financial problems. I couldn't bring myself to tell her how bad things had gotten. The isolation was almost worse than the poverty. November arrived cold and merciless. I woke up on the 15th with $37 in my pocket. Rent was due in 2 days, and I was $113 short. I hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. My stomach cramped with hunger, my head fuzzy from lack of food. I walked to the public library because it was warm and free, sat at a computer, and searched desperately for any kind of work. That's when I saw the advertisement: donate plasma and earn up to $50. First-time donors welcome. I'd never donated blood before, never even considered it. The idea of selling part of my body felt degrading, like I'd crossed into some new category of desperate. But I had no other options. No other way to get money quickly enough to avoid being thrown out on the street. I wrote down the address of the donation center and started walking. It was 3 miles away, and by the time I arrived, my feet ached, and I was lightheaded from hunger and dehydration. The Phoenix Plasma Center was located in a strip mall between a dollar store and a payday loan office. The building was clean, but institutional, with fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead and linoleum floors that squeaked under my shoes. I pushed open the door and approached the front desk. A woman in scrubs looked up at me with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. First time she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. She handed me a clipboard thick with forms. Fill these out. Be honest about your medical history. Any lies will disqualify you permanently. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair and worked through the paperwork. Page after page of questions about my health, my medications, my medical history, whether I'd traveled internationally, whether I'd engaged in high-risk behaviors. I checked boxes and signed acknowledgments, my hand shaking slightly. When I finished, I returned the clipboard to the desk. The woman reviewed my forms, entered information into her computer, then called my name. "Follow me," she said. She led me to a small examination room where she took my blood pressure, temperature, and pulse. She pricked my finger to test my iron levels and had me step on a scale. 112 pounds, she noted, frowning slightly. "You're on the low end, but acceptable." Then she explained the process. The machine would draw my blood, separate the plasma, and return the red blood cells to my body. It would take about 90 minutes. I'd receive $40 today as a first-time donor, $50 for subsequent donations. Did I have any questions? "How soon can we start?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow. She studied my face for a moment, and I wondered what she saw there. Desperation, defeat. Whatever it was, her expression softened slightly. "Come with me," she said. The donation floor was a large room filled with reclining chairs, arranged in rows, each with an IV pole and a machine beside it. About a dozen people were already donating, lying back with needles in their arms, watching television screens mounted from the ceiling. The woman led me to an empty chair at the end of a row. "Sit here. Get comfortable. Someone will be with you shortly." I sat down in the chair. It was worn, but clean, covered in vinyl that cracked when I moved. A television above me played a sitcom I didn't recognize. The laugh track sounded jarring in this sterile space. A phlebotomist appeared, a young man with tired eyes and practiced efficiency. First time he asked, and I nodded again. It seemed to be the only question anyone asked here. He swabbed my arm with something cold, felt for a vein, and before I could brace myself, slid the needle in. I flinched, but didn't cry out. The machine beside me hummed to life. "Watch the TV," he suggested. "Try to relax. It goes faster if you're calm." Then he moved on to the next patient. I lay there watching my blood flow through clear tubes into the machine. It was hypnotic in a horrible way, seeing this essential part of myself extracted and processed. The machine separated the plasma, that yellowish liquid, and returned the darker red blood cells back into my vein. The whole process felt like a metaphor for my life. Everything valuable being taken from me, only the bare minimum returned to keep me functional. The man in the chair next to me noticed my expression. First time he asked, and I almost laughed at hearing that question again. "Yeah," I managed to say. He was probably in his 60s, weathered face and rough hands. "It gets easier," he said kindly. "I do this twice a week. The money helps." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without crying. This was my life now. Lying in a plasma donation center next to a stranger, both of us so desperate for money that we were selling our blood. 90 minutes later, the machine beeped. The phlebotomist returned, removed the needle, and pressed gauze against my arm. "Hold pressure here for 5 minutes, he instructed. "Don't stand up too fast. Drink lots of water when you leave." I did as I was told, sitting in the chair for a few extra minutes until the dizziness passed. Then I walked to the front desk on shaky legs. The woman in scrubs handed me 4 $10 bills. $40. "Thank you for donating," she said in that same practiced tone. "You can come back in 2 days if you'd like." I folded the money and put it in my pocket, then walked outside into the late afternoon sun. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, just breathing. I'd sold my plasma. I'd sold a part of my body for $40. This was the lowest point of my life. I walked to a nearby grocery store and bought the cheapest food I could find. A loaf of bread for $2, a jar of peanut butter for $4, a gallon of milk for $3, bananas because they were cheap and filling. My total came to $12.38. I paid and walked back to my rented room, clutching the plastic bag like it contained treasure. In a way, it did. This was food for the next few days. This was survival. That night, I ate peanut butter sandwiches and cried. I cried for the life I'd lost, for the marriage that had been a lie, for the business that had failed, for the person I used to be. But I also made a decision. I would survive this. I would survive one day at a time, one meal at a time, one breath at a time. I had to believe it would get better because the alternative was giving up completely. 1 week later, my phone rang. The number was local but unfamiliar. I answered cautiously. "Is this Janessa Winters?" a professional female voice asked. "Yes," I replied. "This is Dr. Patel from Phoenix Plasma Center. We need you to come back to the center as soon as possible. There's something important we need to discuss about your donation." My stomach dropped. Oh God, I thought, I have some terrible disease. They found something in my blood. Ms. Winters, the voice continued, sensing my panic. You're not in trouble and you're not sick. But this is urgent. Can you come in today? I took the bus to the plasma center using my last few dollars. When I arrived, the woman at the desk was expecting me. She led me past the donation floor to a back office I hadn't seen before. Inside, Dr. Patel waited along with another woman in a business suit. Please sit down, Dr. Patel said, gesturing to a chair. This is Dr. Catherine Larson from Biopharma Genetics. They're a pharmaceutical research company. My heart hammered in my chest. What's going on? Dr. Larson opened a folder on the desk between us. Ms. Winters, she began, all plasma donations are screened for safety and quality. During routine screening of your donation, our laboratory discovered something extraordinary. Your plasma contains a very rare type of antibody. I stared at her, not understanding. Is that bad? I asked. No, she said quickly. It's remarkable. This particular antibody formation is found in approximately 1 in 500,000 people. We've been searching for a donor with these exact markers for nearly a decade. Dr. Patel took over the explanation. These antibodies have the potential to treat a rare genetic blood disorder called Hellman-Kovac syndrome. It affects roughly 2,000 people in the United States, mostly children. Currently, there's no effective treatment. Patients require constant blood transfusions, and most don't live past their 20s. But with your antibodies, Dr. Larson continued, we believe we can develop a therapeutic treatment. We can save lives. I tried to process what they were telling me. You want my blood? More specifically, Dr. Larson said, we want to license the rights to use your plasma antibodies for pharmaceutical development. We'd need you to donate regularly during the research and development phase, which could take 18 to 24 months. In exchange, Biopharma Genetics is prepared to offer you compensation. She slid a document across the desk. The number at the bottom made me blink. $250,000 as an upfront licensing fee. An additional 10% royalty on any medication we successfully bring to market. Based on our projections, if the drug is approved and released, you could earn between $1 and $3 million annually for the life of the patent. I couldn't breathe. The numbers swam before my eyes. This had to be a joke, some kind of scam. Dr. Larson must have seen my expression because she continued gently. This is legitimate, Ms. Winters. Your antibodies are extraordinarily valuable. You'd be helping save lives while also being fairly compensated for your contribution. We have lawyers who can review the contract with you. We want you to feel completely comfortable with this arrangement. Dr. Patel added, you can take time to think about it, consult with anyone you trust. But I want you to understand how rare this is. We've tested millions of donations. You're the first person we've found with this exact antibody profile. I looked down at my hands, rough and chapped from washing dishes in restaurant sinks. 1 week ago, I'd sold my plasma for $40 just to buy food. Now these people were talking about millions of dollars. It didn't feel real. Can I see a lawyer? I asked. Of course, Dr. Larson said, handing me a business card. Here's our contact information. We can arrange a consultation with an independent attorney at our expense. Take whatever time you need. I left the plasma center in a daze. I used the bus ride back to my room to start processing what had just happened. That night, I called the number on Dr. Larson's card. A receptionist scheduled me for a meeting with an attorney the following Tuesday. Biopharma Genetics would pay for the consultation. The next few days crawled by. I continued my odd jobs handing out flyers and washing dishes. But my mind was elsewhere. This could change everything. Or it could be too good to be true. Tuesday arrived, and I met with the attorney, a woman named Patricia Henderson, who specialized in pharmaceutical contracts. Her office was in a nice part of Phoenix, the kind of building I couldn't have afforded to enter a few months ago. She reviewed the contract Biopharma had prepared, asking me questions about my understanding and my concerns. After 2 hours, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. This is legitimate, she said. I've worked with Biopharma before. They're a reputable company. The terms are actually quite favorable. If you're comfortable proceeding, I'd recommend you sign. The following Monday, I sat in a conference room at Biopharma's headquarters, a modern glass building in Tempe. Dr. Larson was there, along with several lawyers and executives. They walked me through every clause of the agreement. I would donate plasma twice a week for the next 2 years. They'd monitor my health carefully, provide any medical care I needed. The $250,000 would be transferred to my account immediately upon signing. Royalties would begin when the drug received FDA approval and went to market projected to be in 3 to 4 years. I signed my name at the bottom of the contract. My hand was steady. Within 48 hours, I received an email notification from my bank. Account deposit $250,000. I sat on the floor of my tiny rented room and stared at my phone screen until the numbers blurred. From $37 to $250,000. It didn't seem possible. My first priority was debt. I scheduled a meeting with my bankruptcy attorney and paid off the entire $125,000 I owed on the business loan. The relief was indescribable. For the first time in months, I could breathe without that crushing weight on my chest. Next, I found a small one-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just clean and quiet and mine. I bought a reliable used car, a Honda Civic with 100,000 miles that ran perfectly. I stocked my refrigerator with real food, fresh vegetables, chicken, milk that wasn't about to expire. I bought new clothes to replace the worn-out things I'd been rotating through. I got a haircut for the first time in 6 months. I went to a dentist and got my teeth cleaned. These small acts of self-care felt revolutionary. I was becoming human again. With my immediate needs met and my debt cleared, I still had about $80,000 remaining. I met with a financial advisor and invested half, keeping the rest as an emergency fund. I'd learned my lesson about having a cushion. Then I started working again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I reached out to former clients from before everything collapsed, offering freelance design services. My first project was a logo redesign for a small organic bakery, $5,000 for 2 weeks of work. The owner was kind and appreciative. More work followed. A website for a yoga studio. Branding materials for a coffee shop. I worked from my apartment, setting my own hours, choosing projects I actually cared about. By December, 4 months after signing the biopharma contract, my life had stabilized in ways I'd thought impossible. Then Derek came back. It started with a text message on a random Tuesday afternoon. "Hey, can we talk? I miss you." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. 2 days later, another message. "I made a mistake. I want to work things out." I blocked his number. But Derek wasn't done. A week later, he showed up at my apartment building. I have no idea how he found my address. I'd moved, changed my number, started over. But there he was, standing in the hallway outside my door, looking exactly like the man I'd married. Well-dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, hair perfectly styled, that familiar, confident smile on his face. "Janessa, please," he said when I opened the door. "We need to talk." "How did you find me?" I asked coldly. "That doesn't matter," he said, waving away the question. "What matters is us. I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I realize I made a terrible mistake. Sienna and I broke up. I realize you were the one all along." I stood in the doorway, not inviting him in. "What do you really want, Derek?" His expression flickered just for a second before the charm returned. "I want my wife back. I want us to start over. We could try again, maybe even restart the business with a better plan this time." There it was. "How did you find out?" I asked quietly. About what he said, but his eyes gave him away. About the money. About my plasma. His face flushed. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm here because I love you." I almost laughed. "Derek, don't lie to me. You heard about it somehow. That's the only reason you're standing here." Under pressure, his facade cracked. "Fine," he admitted. "I heard from a friend who works at Phoenix General. There was talk about a woman in Phoenix who had some kind of rare blood thing worth millions. I asked around and found out it was you. But that's not why I'm here. I genuinely miss you. I genuinely want to make things work." I looked at this man I'd once loved with my whole heart. The man I'd trusted with my dreams, my business, my future. The man who'd abandoned me when I was at my lowest, who'd left me drowning in debt while he walked away clean, who'd been planning our business failure even while pretending to work toward success. Now he stood in my hallway asking me to take him back because he'd heard I had money. No, I said simply. Derek's confident expression faltered. What you heard me. Heard. No. Janessa, come on, he started, but I cut him off. You left me when I had nothing. When I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor in a room that cost $350 a month. When I was eating one meal a day. When I was washing dishes for cash under the table. You left me drowning in $125,000 of debt that you created. You planned it, Derek. You structured that loan in my name on purpose. That's not true, he protested weakly. I heard you on the phone. I continued, my voice getting stronger. Once this business fails, I'll be free. The prenup will protect me. You weren't just leaving me. You were setting me up to fail so you could walk away clean. And it worked. You got exactly what you wanted. Derek's face went red. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. And now you're here because you think I have money I asked. Because you want to help me manage it. Maybe restart the business with my capital. His silence was answer enough. Get out, I said, opening the door wider. The divorce was finalized 2 months ago. I don't need you. I don't want you. But Janessa, he started, I can help you. You don't know how to handle this kind of money. You'll make mistakes. You'll need guidance. I laughed, then a sharp, bitter sound. I made one mistake, Derek. I trusted you. I'm not making that mistake again. Now leave before I call the police for trespassing. He tried to argue more, saying he loved me, that we had history, that I was making a huge mistake. But I stood firm. Finally, his expression hardened into something ugly. You're going to regret this, he said. You're nothing without me. You'll waste all that money and end up right back where you started. Maybe, I said calmly. But at least I'll do it on my own terms without someone actively sabotaging me. Now get out of my life. Derek left his footsteps angry on the stairs. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a moment. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from relief, from a sense of power I'd never felt before. I'd said no. I'd protected myself, and it felt incredible. The weeks following Derek's appearance were strange. I kept expecting him to try again, to show up or call, or find some new way to insert himself back into my life. But he didn't. I later learned through mutual acquaintances that he'd tried to hire a lawyer to contest the divorce settlement, claiming he deserved a portion of my biopharma earnings. His lawyer apparently laughed at him. The prenup Derek himself had insisted on was ironclad. The divorce was finalized before I'd even signed the biopharma contract. He had no legal claim to anything. The case was dismissed before it even reached a courtroom. I focused on rebuilding my life with intention. My freelance design business grew steadily. I wasn't taking every job that came my way anymore. I could afford to be selective, choosing projects that interested me or aligned with causes I cared about. I designed a website for a nonprofit helping domestic violence survivors. I created branding for a bookstore that specialized in diverse authors. Work became fulfilling again instead of desperate. My income from freelancing alone reached about $10,000 a month. I didn't need the money anymore, but I loved the work. In March, I joined a support group for women who'd been through difficult divorces. Sitting in a circle of folding chairs in a community center, listening to other women's stories, I realized I wasn't alone. One woman's husband had emptied their bank account and moved to another state. Another had discovered her partner's gambling addiction only after he'd lost their house. We shared our experiences, our pain, our slow journey toward healing. These women became friends, real friends, who knew the worst parts of my story and stayed anyway. My relationship with biopharma continued smoothly. I donated plasma twice a week at a private facility they'd set up. The process had become routine, almost meditative. I'd lie in the comfortable chair, read a book, or listen to podcasts, and think about the lives this was helping to save. In April, Dr. Larson invited me to tour the research laboratory, where they were developing the drug. I met the scientists working on the project, saw the careful processes they used to isolate and study the antibodies in my plasma. Then she introduced me to someone who changed my entire perspective. Her name was Lily, an 8-year-old girl with huge brown eyes and a bright smile, despite the medical port visible in her chest. Lily had Hellman-Kovac syndrome. She'd been living with the disease since she was 3, enduring weekly blood transfusions, spending more time in hospitals than at school. Her mother, Rachel, stood beside her with exhausted hope in her eyes. Dr. Larson had arranged this meeting carefully, making sure Lily was having a good health day, making sure I was comfortable with it. Lily looked up at me with those big eyes and said, "Are you the plasma lady?" I nodded, suddenly emotional. "My mom says you're helping make medicine for kids like me." That's the plan, I managed to say. "Thank you," Lily said simply. "I don't like being sick all the time." Her mother reached out and squeezed my hand. "You have no idea what this means," Rachel whispered. "If this drug works, my daughter could have a normal life. She could grow up, go to college, have a future." "I'm just giving plasma," I said, feeling inadequate. "You're giving hope," Rachel corrected me. That encounter stayed with me for weeks. Every time I donated after that, I thought about Lily, about the 2,000 other people like her, mostly children, suffering from a disease with no effective treatment. The money from biopharma had changed my life, absolutely. But this, helping to develop a treatment that could save lives, this was something far more significant than wealth. May brought more news. Dr. Larson called to tell me the drug had successfully completed phase 3 clinical trials. The results were extraordinary. 92% of patients showed significant improvement. Some went into complete remission. The FDA was fast-tracking approval given the severity of the disease and the lack of existing treatments. If everything proceeded on schedule, the drug would be available within 6 months. When it launched, my royalty payments would begin. Based on updated market projections, I could expect between $1.5 and $2.5 million annually. I sat with that information for a long time. The number was so large, it had become almost abstract. I scheduled a meeting with my financial advisor to discuss long-term planning, investment strategies, tax implications. I also started thinking about what I wanted to do with this wealth beyond just securing my own future. I'd come so close to complete destruction. I knew what it felt like to be desperate and alone with no safety net. I wanted to help others in that situation. In June, I established a small private fund to help women going through bankruptcy or difficult divorces. I partnered with a local legal aid organization, providing funding for women who couldn't afford lawyers in divorce proceedings. I covered costs for financial counseling, helping women understand and rebuild their credit. It wasn't a massive operation, just a way to use my resources to help people in situations similar to what I'd experienced. The first woman I helped was named Diana. Her husband had left her with 3 young children and $30,000 in credit card debt. I paid for her lawyer and covered 6 months of her rent while she got back on her feet. The gratitude in her eyes reminded me of how I'd felt when biopharma made their offer. Like someone had thrown me a life preserver when I was drowning. July brought an unexpected encounter. I was having coffee at a local cafe working on a logo design on my laptop when I looked up and saw Derek sitting 3 tables away. He was with a woman attractive and well-dressed, laughing at something he'd said. For a moment, our eyes met. His expression went through several shifts: surprise, calculation, shame. I simply nodded in acknowledgement and looked back down at my computer. I heard him say something to his companion, then heard his footsteps approaching my table. "Janessa," he said, "can we talk for a minute?" I looked up at him. This man who'd once been my everything, and was now just a stranger with a familiar face. "There's nothing to talk about," I said calmly. He glanced back at his table where the woman was watching curiously. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly, "for how I handled things, for how I treated you." I waited. "Is there more?" I asked. "Because if that's it, apology noted. You can go back to your date." He shifted uncomfortably. "I heard the drug got approved, that it's launching soon." There it is, I thought. And I asked. "And I just wanted to say congratulations. You deserve something good after everything." His words sounded rehearsed. "Thank you," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." Derek hesitated, clearly wanting to say more, but I'd already returned my attention to my laptop. After a moment, he walked back to his table. I watched from my peripheral vision as he sat down as the woman asked him something, as he shook his head and changed the subject. I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no lingering affection. He was just a person I used to know, someone who'd been part of my past, but had no place in my future. That realization was freeing. It's been a year and a half since I sold my plasma for $40. I'm 30 years old now, and my life is unrecognizable from that desperate woman sitting in the donation center. The drug officially named Helmicor launched 4 months ago. The first shipment went to hospitals across the country. Lily was among the first patients to receive it. Her mother sends me updates every few weeks. Lily's doing well. Her energy is up. She's attending school full-time for the first time in her life. She joined a soccer team. My first royalty payment arrived last month, $1.8 million. I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the bank transfer notification on my phone. The amount was surreal, life-changing. But what struck me most wasn't the money itself. It was what the money represented. 2,000 people, mostly children, getting a treatment that could save or dramatically improve their lives. And I'd played a small but crucial part in making that happen. I've been smart with the money this time. I bought a house, but nothing extravagant. A 3-bedroom bungalow in a quiet Phoenix neighborhood with a small yard and a fig tree. I drive the same Honda Civic. I still do freelance design work because I genuinely enjoy it. My wardrobe is nicer now, but I'm not drowning in designer labels. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. The money sits in carefully managed investments, growing steadily, providing security and options. But it doesn't define me. My charitable work has expanded. The fund I started now helps about 20 women a year navigate bankruptcy and divorce. I've partnered with biopharma to sponsor research into other rare diseases. I donate to children's hospitals and blood disorder research facilities. Last month, I was invited to speak at a medical conference about the importance of plasma donation and rare antibody research. Standing at that podium looking out at researchers and doctors, I talked about my journey. From selling plasma for $40 to being part of developing a life-saving treatment. Several people came up to me afterward with tears in their eyes, telling me about patients they'd treated or family members with rare diseases. "I'm not a hero," I kept saying. "I just have unusual antibodies." But one doctor shook his head. "You chose to help. You could have said no. That makes a difference." I've started dating again. His name is Marcus, and he's a high school English teacher. We met at a bookstore, both reaching for the same novel. He asked me to coffee, and we spent 3 hours talking about books and teaching and life. Marcus doesn't know about the money, not yet. I've been careful about that, wanting to make sure any relationship I build is based on genuine connection, not financial interest. But I'll tell him soon. He deserves honesty. For now, I'm enjoying getting to know someone who makes me laugh, who asks thoughtful questions, who treats me with respect and kindness. Simple things that matter more than I ever realized. I don't see Derek anymore. I heard through acquaintances that he and Sienna broke up, that he struggled to find stable work, that he bounced between a few failed business ventures. I feel nothing about this information except maybe a distant sadness that someone I once loved turned out to be so deeply flawed. I don't wish him harm, but I don't wish him well either. He's simply irrelevant to my life now. The most important thing I've learned through this entire experience is something about value. When I was sitting in that donation center selling my plasma for $40, Derek's abandonment had made me feel worthless, like I was someone who deserved to be left behind, like my worth was tied to my bank account or my business success or someone else's love. But that plasma, the thing I sold for $40 because I was desperate, turned out to be worth millions. Not because money magically appeared, but because it had the capacity to help people, to save lives. And I've realized the same is true about me. My worth wasn't determined by Derek's decision to leave. It wasn't determined by the business failure or the bankruptcy or the months of poverty. My worth is inherent, unchanged by circumstances. I was valuable when I had nothing. I'm valuable now that I have resources. The difference is that now I understand and believe that. I don't need anyone to validate my existence or my choices. I don't need to earn love through achievement or money or being someone I'm not. Rock bottom became my foundation. That moment in the plasma center, feeling like I'd lost everything, was actually the moment I started finding myself. The real self, not the version shaped by a manipulative partner, or society's expectations or my own fears. I learned I'm stronger than I knew. I learned I can survive things I thought would destroy me. I learned that giving up isn't the same as letting go. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who diminish you. If someone had told me 18 months ago that selling my plasma would lead to millions of dollars, I wouldn't have believed them. But more importantly, if someone had told me that losing everything would lead to finding myself, I wouldn't have believed that either. Both turned out to be true. The money changed my circumstances. The struggle changed me. And while I'm grateful for the financial security, I'm more grateful for the woman I became through the process of losing and rebuilding. Derek wanted me to believe I needed him, that I was nothing without him, that I'd fail and come crawling back. He was wrong on every count. I didn't need him then, and I certainly don't need him now. I needed to believe in myself, to trust my own strength, to understand that partnership should elevate both people, not require one person to make themselves smaller, so the other can feel bigger. Real love doesn't abandon you during the hard times. Real partnership means facing difficulties together, not running when things get uncomfortable. Sometimes I think about calling Derek not to gloat or seek revenge, but to thank him, because his betrayal, as painful as it was, freed me from a relationship that was destroying me slowly. His absence forced me to discover my own strength. His cruelty taught me what I will and will not accept in my life. I won't call because I genuinely don't need that closure. But there's a strange gratitude mixed in with the painful memories. He showed me exactly who he was, and I finally believed him. The $40 I received for my plasma that November day saved my life, in ways I'm still discovering. It bought me food when I was hungry. But more than that, it started a chain of events that gave me back my future. Not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. I'm not the same woman who walked into that donation center 18 months ago. I'm stronger, wiser, more compassionate, more protective of my energy and my boundaries, more aware of my own value. And when Derek came crawling back trying to reclaim a woman he'd abandoned, I had something he could never buy or steal or manipulate away from me. Self-respect, the knowledge that I'm enough exactly as I am, that my worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. That moment when I told him no, when I closed the door on a man who tried to destroy me, was more satisfying than any amount of money could ever be. Sometimes your lowest moment is just the universe rerouting you towards something better. Sometimes the people who leave your life are making room for the people who should be there. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what really matters. That $40 plasma donation changed my life, but not because it led to millions of dollars, because it forced me to survive. And in surviving, I learned how to truly live. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ended up being a blessing in disguise? Has anyone ever left you during your darkest hour, only to try to come back when things got better? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and sharing them might help someone else going through something similar. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel to hear more stories about resilient survival and finding strength you didn't know you had. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their lowest point isn't their final destination. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you're stronger than you think, that you deserve people who stand by you through difficulties, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing that ever could. Take care of yourselves. You're valuable exactly as you are. Wishing you strength, healing, and the courage to walk away from anyone who makes you feel otherwise.